Just before the episode, I would like to thank all our Patreon members. You guys, the support means the world to me and helps keep this podcast going. And if you haven't signed up for Patreon yet, just so you know, Linzi from formerly 33% Pulp and I cover a lot of different true crime and history media, like The Keepers and the Paradise Lost series, as well as covering some topics that you guys probably wouldn't hear about otherwise. You know, we've covered the I Knew of Japan, we've covered Bernard Pernat, lots of different cases, and as well as some surprise and different kinds of content, such as crazy sci-fi movies comes up as well. So love if you would check it out. Thank you guys for all the support and allowing me to keep doing this for the past few years, so thank you. And now, on to the episode. Welcome back, friends, to the Cult of Domesticity. I'm very tired, and we're back with Linzi. Bread has taken over my life, fucked up the bread schedule, so my sleep has fucked up. I'm sorry if I sound really tired. That is what it is.
Well, it's good that you're tired. I mean, and not sick, which is what I first thought when I heard your voice. So at least there's that.
That's why I was prefacing that, because I've also worked all weekend, so I do sound tired, and I get to go get my second COVID test since I've returned to work tomorrow. Ugh. Hey. And this time I've actually been near the infected person.
I've been so pumped to do this. So I'm talking about Natalie Wood today. Do you remember your first, experience learning about her life or death?
So I am a huge fan of the OG Christmas on 34th Street or Miracle on 34th Street. So that was my first experience with her. And then I never knew anything. And then I got really big into these weird unsolved mysteries. And I found out and I was like, what the fuck is this? I think my sister told me to cover this. Shout out, Caitlin. I know you don't listen because you're busy, but I love your face.
Yeah, so my first contact with this was the 2000 Vanity Fair article where Davern, Dennis Davern, the captain of the boat, I'll tell you about him, he had come forward with more information. I remember I was at a baseball game and I fucking hate baseball, and I was just reading this article, like completely intrigued, and I had never heard of Natalie Wood, but she was massive.
Can I please say, I did not know where the end of that story was going, and then I got hit in the face with a baseball or something like that. I didn't know. It was like a wild roller coaster. I was like,
no, I fucking hate baseball. It's like the most boring ass sport. Well, I know people like baseball, so if you like baseball, that's chill and fine. My dad likes baseball. That's cool. Baseball, you know. But yeah, Miracle on 34th Street was her biggest role. So Natalie Wood was born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko.
You do the same thing I do. You take a breath and you're just like pray to whatever god you need to say it.
So she was born on July 20th, 1938. And so she was 8 when she was filming Miracle on 34th Street. Her mom, who is sometimes called Mud and sometimes called Marie, was she sounds very unhealthy insofar as she was one of those star moms. So yeah, her mom, was from Russia. She spoke Russian, which is something that Natalie never spoke totally fluently, but she was always very much intrigued by Russia. She did visit once and then was very unimpressed and came back. And when she got back on U.S. soil, she started singing the Star-Spangled Banner because that's how much she disliked Russia. That said, she did like Russian culture. This is something that her parents taught her. But the thing here, and the thing to kind of keep in mind, is how intense her mom controlled her life, to the extent where she herself described her life as a dichotomy between Natasha, which is what they called her, even though her name was Natalia, they called her Natasha. I think it's like I don't know, actually. I think that's kind of weird. Usually when it's like Benjamin, you're just like Ben. So Ben is shorter than Benjamin, but
it's the Russian version of it.
Natalia and Natasha?
Natasha is Russian. I don't think Natalia is Russian.
Natalia is her birth name.
I know, but the Russian nicknames make no sense, okay?
Okay, yeah, I have no idea.
If someone can explain it to me, please, but no, I'm pretty sure they don't make a lot of sense to me.
So she does go by like all different kinds of things, but Natalie Wood is very much a persona, and a persona that was born from her mom. When she was going going around and doing these early auditions. Her mom would lie to her. Her mom would have like a butterfly in a box and like rip its wings off so that she would cry. On cue, she would tell her that the dog was dead and so that she would cry on cue. And so from a very young age, she did not have full autonomy at all. She was constantly ruled by her mom, ruled by, very soon after she started acting and getting more successful, very much ruled by men in Hollywood. So her big...
the patriarchy.
The big breakthrough was Miracle on 34th Street, which she filmed when she was 8. Basically, nonstop working. To kind of foreground this, most of my knowledge came from Suzanne Feinsted's updated version of her original book, Natasha. It's now called Natalie Wood. She re-released it with a new act a new act called Revelations, where new information has come forward with the death that we will discuss in a minute. It was awesome. It's a great book. Highly recommended. I also watched the 48-hour special. Not as good as the book.
There's a 48-hour special?
Yeah. I also watched the BuzzFeed True Crime thing on it. And actually that had different information. So I will try to credit as we go through where I got the information from, but the vast majority of this is coming from Suzanne Feinsted's Natalie Wood book. So she begins acting, and she herself at the time, so she would have been early, like preteens at the time, making a distinction between a child actor and a child star. So she identified as a child actor. So she just was thrown into this professional realm and was seen as a professional. So she's seeing a lot of people. Her mom is like determining who she can see, who she can have friends with, be friends with. There's a boy at her school called Jimmy Wales, who she was very much infatuated by. He ended up cutting off her pigtails at school, which was a thing. And for her, actually, symbolized her move from childhood to adulthood, because it symbolized like, okay, those are my, braided pigtail things, and now he cut them off, and it was almost like, I think in the book they align it with like losing one's virginity or something. But so she is very much active. By the time she's 17, she's in Rebel Without a Cause, right? So that's one of the first movies that she's really well known for, besides Miracle on 34th Street. Following movies would be things like West Side Story, would be Gypsy, the movie that she did when she played Gypsy Rose Lee, the burlesque star. She was in Splendor in the Grass, and just actually a lot of movies, and I hadn't realized that she was in so many movies.
Well, if you think about it, you said her mom is making her work all the time. I'm sure that control never really let up until her mom probably dies. So she's probably like, you're doing this, you're doing that. And it's the studio system, so you don't really get an option.
Right, and so it's very much the studio system. And it was actually Miracle on 34th Street that brought Natalie Wood to Frank Sinatra's attention. So Frank Sinatra was introduced to her when she was 15. Suzanne Feinsted would later speculate that this is about when he started molesting her. He was one of many people actually who would sexually abuse her and then just take advantage of her. Another one was Christopher Ray, or Nicholas Ray, the director of Rebel Without a Cause, who invited her to his hotel room to do a reading. And it actually, it was basically a Harvey Weinstein, where he locked her in the room and forced himself upon her in a way that was so violent that she had trouble walking, and she did not go to the hospital because she was concerned about being, found out, and then not getting the role. So, and those are just two of the instances. There were several others. One of her friends at the time said that for a 17-year-old, she was way too savvy with men's bodies for a 17-year-old, So
she could have been, you said Frank Sinatra was when she was 15. And when was the incident with her getting her pigtails cut off?
That was preteens. Yeah.
Preteens? So she might have, the amount of abuse that could have been going on, and her knowing, don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. The hush-hush system of powerful men. Plus, you have to think that fucks up your psyche a lot.
It really fucks up your psyche, and that's what I mean, is there was this strict dichotomy between Natasha and Natalie Wood, which comes up, I feel, a lot in her life. Later, another thing is, like, she very much, Natasha, I mean, she very much was controlled by her mom. One of the things, and one sign of this, is her mom was once told by a fortune teller in Russia that she would drown in dark water. So the mom, like, was very concerned about this, thought that she would definitely drown in dark water and so on, and was so afraid of dark water that this kind of got passed on to Natalie. So Natalie was always afraid of dark water. She did an interview in 1980, which would have been 1 year before she drowned in dark water, saying that she was deathly afraid. She said, "I've always been afraid of dark water, seawater, and been afraid that she would die." One of the first instances of where this came up in her professional life, so one of the first instances of where, like, this dark water thing would come up, and it comes up like 3 or 4 times in this poor woman's life, and it seems so odd, like, considering how kind of specific that is, drowning in dark water. So when she was filming The Green Promise, which was released in 1949, and I don't have the date of when she was filming this, she was supposed to run across, like, a broken, crappy bridge during a thunderstorm, and the bridge is over some tumultuous, dark water. The bridge was supposed to collapse as soon as she got across it, but it didn't. It collapsed when she was on the bridge, causing her to fall. She broke her left wrist and almost drowned. The director told the people to keep filming, to keep rolling, because it looked so real. And it was. And it terrified this poor child even more, you know. This incident where she, like, broke her left wrist left her with a bone that kind of stuck out of her wrist that she was very much self-conscious about. And she would always cover with a bracelet. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind, is that she was very self-conscious about her wrist. There was only one scene in one movie where it is not covered. She is never seen in public without something on her left wrist, because she was so concerned about, like, this, what she considered a deformity.
But if you think about it, it's also a signal of that trauma too. So you want to kind of, like, cover up the trauma with anything you can. And you've already said, it seems like she disassociates things that happen to Natalie because she's Natasha. I don't have a psychology degree, but I think that seems kind of plausible.
The point about trauma is totally legit, and now what she is doing, almost like it validates her fear. And now she's walking around with validation that she should be afraid of dark water. So her friend Scott Marlowe said that her mom, basically, he says, quote, her mother was a pimp. He wouldn't be surprised if Natalie was pushed onto Sinatra, though Suzanne Feinstead thinks that it was actually Sinatra going after Natalie. But either which way, she was with Sinatra. Scott Marlowe says, that wouldn't surprise me if you were a movie star.
It could have been mutually both.
Yeah, the mom and Sinatra, yeah, for sure. Like, it was...
Even, like, the mom being like, you need to spend time with him. He's a powerful man. Do whatever you need to do to please him. Maybe not explicitly saying have sex with him or, like, do anything. And Sinatra just took, like, she's willing.
I think it's so fucking gross that she was 8 in that movie, and then that's when, like, she first got his attention. Again, this is according to Suzanne Feinstead. So she marries Robert Wagner, also RJ, also sometimes Bob. So I'll probably call him RJ or Wagner moving forward. They get married in 1957, and when she was 19 and he was 27.
No. This is a whole lot of nope. I'm sorry. She is still a child. I don't care if she's legally an adult. I still have a problem with this.
He is much younger than the men she had been dating prior to this. So she was with a guy who was in his 40s, and I can't remember who it was, but, like, that was one of them. And I think Dennis Hopper, when they were filming Rebel Without a Cause, was saying how basically he saw her being passed around a lot, that was kind of part of the culture, I guess, and part of the way that she networked. It's fucking horrible. As a side note, kind of interesting she was very much fascinated by people who studied method acting. So method acting, for just the, Cliff Notes version, is where you kind of try to embody the character as if you are that character and you live as that character, which is very much...
So Daniel Day-Lewis is known for being a method actor.
James Dean is known for being a method actor as well. Marilyn Monroe was trained in this way. Christopher Walken was trained in this way. So...
Really?
Yes.
Huh. Did not know that about him. I mean, this makes it lighter because this is just depressing right now as hell to think of how much trauma and how that's the only way she knows to get attention and get things she has to get is to use her body, whether she wants to or not.
And she was legit skilled, she was quite skilled, I think, in part because her life was method acting, because she was just kind of a shell of a person who had this exterior thing who was acting. I mean, I think it was kind of like a kaleidoscope of her mom and, the roles she was playing and whatever guy was manipulating her at the time and all of this stuff. And so I think she really had based on my read of it, she struggled with who she was, as an individual. She didn't know.
Or it was buried so deep inside to protect herself, because if you got if you have trauma at a young age, it seems like a lot of people, you just bury it just because it's safer.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So she marries Robert Wagner in 1957. They divorce 5 years later. The reasons for the divorce publicly was that she was having an affair with Warren Beatty, with whom she filmed Splendor in the Grass in 1961. This is not true. This is how it was documented in a semi-recent film version of her life, is that the cause of their first divorce was her cheating on him with Warren Beatty. I don't know. It doesn't sound like they had an affair. Instead, what I think is more likely is they divorced in 1962 when she saw him fucking the butler.
What?
Yeah.
What?
It was around this time where Robert Wagner was just he took risky trysts, or his trysts were risky. He enjoyed that. So he would go into parties and other actors would find him in a room with another guy with, it's funny in the book, it says something like, it wasn't anything too bad. It's just one of them was fingering the other one's asshole. So this is kind of going on the down low, behind the scenes shit.
I'm not gonna lie, the secret sex parties of pretty much golden age on Hollywood is so crazy. You're just what the fuck?
It's crazy. It's crazy. And she is part of that. She hung out with James Dean and Dennis Hopper, as noted, they were part of this kind of cool kind of crowd that would eventually kind of go in that direction as well. I mean, she married Robert Wagner. So what is interesting, I think, and useful here is that, he identified as bisexual.
Actually, I didn't know he identified as bi.
Yeah, that's what actually, okay, correction. He has never identified as bi. He's never identified as bisexual. But, I mean, there are so many records of him with other guys, random witnesses. He, in one of his interviews, I think in the 50s, he is interviewed with his fucking butler, David, it's something Cavendish. David Cavendish, who is an older British guy who was living with him and Natalie Wood after they got married. He was called their man about the house. So, and this is, the guy that he eventually was caught with. So she took the whole public brunt of their first divorce because they just said, oh, she was probably fucking Warren Beatty.
Because if you think about it, the 60s at that time, it was easier for him to say she was screwing Warren Beatty, probably released it, rather than being I was screwing my butler and she walked in because I like to screw men and women. Because, I mean, think about it. Bisexuality wasn't as common to be out at that point, Truly,
I don't think it's fucking 2020 and I truly don't think it's totally mainstream, I think still within gay and lesbian and or queer communities, certainly the trend has been not towards bisexuality or inclusivity of bi people. But I think for the most part, I think here, for me, what I think is significant is she let this happen. He let this happen. The rumors were just circulating. Probably this is the case. And she didn't deny them, which, helped him hide his relationships with other men. She remarried to a guy called Richard Gregson in 1969 and divorced him in 1972, like literally, like immediately after she found out that he was having an affair with his secretary. Like immediately. It's like something like that.
Maybe that like she just realized like I can't do this. Like I can't be the side piece.
No.
Or you can't have a
Absolutely,
side piece
yeah.
on it. Good for her.
Because she was like, she kind of believed in marriage and family. She very, very much believed in marriage and family. And so she wanted to protect RJ by saying, yeah, I had an affair, whatever. And so her public persona was damaged in this way. But personally, she very much valued marriage and family. That same year is when she remarried Robert Wagner. So they were married twice. This is in 1972. During all this period of time, she has like 3 kids and has like a cornucopia of stepchildren at this point. I don't know how many. Sorry. At this point now we're basically at the late 80s. Excuse me, late 80s. She didn't need
late 70s.
Late 70s, early, I would say late 70s. She was in really good shape and she loved the kids, but at this time, RJ is drinking a lot. He's drinking a lot. Meanwhile, she was on a sleeping pill every night. She occasionally took a diet pill, which I believe is like speed in a sense.
Yeah, it's a methamphetamine.
Yeah, she sometimes took prescription mood regulators as needed, which are known and still will affect your alcohol like content and ability to like drink and hold your liquor. So that's something. And she was uncomfortable with social drugs. So sometimes like online, going through Reddit forums and shit, they'll be like, oh, she was on the ludes, like Quaaludes or whatever. And based on my read is like, she wasn't actually. She very much stayed away from all of those like recreational type drugs. But she did take a sleeping pill every night and mood regulators as needed.
I think if you think about it, she grew up in that period where a lot of people in Hollywood were on a lot of drugs. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, she probably saw a ton of crazy shit.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, and here she was at Marilyn Monroe's 36th birthday party, which is something she later wrote about in what would be her unpublished autobiography. And she described like Marilyn Monroe going around muttering to herself how like now that she's 36, she's like old and like useless and irrelevant. And so she was like, I never want to be 36. And unfortunately, Marilyn Monroe ended up killing herself only a few days after the birthday party. Hey. Okay. Anyway, I just feel like
this is just getting more and more depressing. Thank you. We started off with my COVID test and we're just talking about people completing suicide. It's fine.
Have you heard any jokes recently? No, me neither. Okay. Anyway, so around this time, I just thought we'd throw in like a knock knock, like just like now that we're at,
Oh, the comment will be so good.
Around this time, she was on an 800-calorie diet.
What?
800 calories, which left her with a 22-inch waist, and she was looking ravishing, which sounds like starving to me. But these are all things to keep in mind. So she's tiny as fuck. Tiny on...
So she's easy to pick up and kidnap is what you're telling me.
If one wanted to, yeah. She's tiny on mood regulators. Let's continue. One thing also to keep in mind too is like throughout all of this, despite his own extramarital dalliances, RJ was like very possessive and very insecure and very jealous. So sometimes people would like jokingly say Mr. Wood, like call him Mr. Wood, and he would get fucking pissed. Like he really did not like this. Frequently, he would be very jealous of her coworkers, co-stars, because she liked and respected them and would party with them and hang out and drink with them and everything, and he did not like this. During their second marriage, they started fighting quite publicly. So this guy, one of their family friends, witnessed, this is a quote, witnessed a few rows between RJ and Natalie, including one that went on a bit when RJ told Mann that Natalie, quote, took an ugly pill and they'd be at each other for whatever the reason, end quote. So he would demean her, call her ugly, and then they would fight publicly. December 31st, 1892. I don't know. I'm just kidding. We're like in the 1800s now. 1980.
1892. Damn.
1980. Now we're in 1980. It is New Year's Eve going into 1981. RJ, they have a massive party at their house. RJ stands up and gives a toast saying things like, "I love you, my darling Natalie." And he says, "In fact, you take my breath away." And he said this quite publicly. And yeah, maybe that does, beat out like all of the shitty fights that they had in front of other people and probably their children. But there it is. I think it's significant that he says, like, "You take my breath away," because of what's going to happen next. So right around now is when she starts filming what would be her last movie called Brainstorm, which she co-starred with Christopher Walken. They got along really well. And he was a method actor, and she was like, "I like you." A lot. People thought that they were having an affair. Likely it was like a really close emotional friendship where like they got along, they worked in the same field, they liked all the same things. He was married to a woman called Georgianne Thon, who he married in 1969. And again, she was already married for the second time to RJ, and they had kids and everything. So I don't get the sense that she would be having an affair, but it did look like to people that they had a very close relationship. And
I think they had an emotional
I do
affair.
think they likely had an emotional affair.
They never physically cheated, but they just like formed such a tight bond, and that's why the jealousy would come out.
Yes. And so I think it's super weird. Like, so yeah, RJ was like super jealous of this relationship. Someone remembers, RJ going out to the East Coast. They were filming in like one of the Carolinas or something, to check on them and to like make sure that they weren't having an affair. This is how crazy that guy is / possessive. So her sister.
Isn't he still alive?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Okay.
Her sister says, "I think this was probably just a flirtation, which is different than having an affair, but it was right up against the edge of that."
I would just say they probably didn't move beyond because they both like knew it wasn't worth it, because like you said, she's very considerate of family and family life and those values. So if you're with that, you're not gonna move to that next step and make it physical.
I don't think so. Like, I just don't think so. But I do think they likely had an emotional kind of connection, which still, I still think it like matters, I still think it's a thing. But then given like RJ's thing, what weirds me out is that Thanksgiving weekend of 1981, they decide to go to Catalina Island with, for some fucking reason, Christopher Walken is there on this boat. So they're on their boat called the Splendor. It's a fairly sizable yacht. I mean, it's not just a fucking boat. These are movie stars on their yacht.
Like, how big is the yacht? I watch a lot of Below Deck. How many meters?
Meters? I don't know. Let's see. I have a picture of...
I mean, that's like a 60-foot, looks like. I am horrible at judging this. Please don't at me.
So important or relevant things are like here, the bridge. Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
The bridge. Here would be like where the rooms are. And I do have a diagram. Sorry, listener.
She's going to send it all to me. It'll be on Facebook. You'll have to go to the Facebook page. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's a boat. It's a yacht. And they have this dinghy next to it. This is them. This is, well, obviously the back of the boat where unfortunate things happened. This is called the Valiant. Prince Valiant, but they also call it sometimes the Zodiac.
It's a 60-foot boat.
Okay.
I Googled it.
And it has this dinghy attached to it, so that'll come back.
So if you guys watch below deck, that's the little boat that follows them, and that's how they transport you from the yacht to shore. Sometimes you just want to chill in the harbor, or you have like a good vantage point and you want to go, I don't know, to other places. So, yes, I watch a lot of below deck. It soothes me. It's very nice and beautiful places they go.
You've recommended this to me before.
I just want to pretend I'm somewhere warm. Winters in Ohio are bullshit.
So I'm going to give you the more or less the breakdown for you. I'll send Courtney this little document that I made showing color-coded like known things and or events that happen with multiple witnesses. So for you, Courtney, and for listeners, that's going to be the stuff in the darkest color. And then I've color-coded everybody's different responses and their different stories of what they say happened along the way.
I love it. I love a good color coding. You know this about me. I'm here for this.
So they crossed from Marina del Rey to Catalina Island on Friday, November 27th, 1981. Walken isn't totally used to being on ships or drinking profusely, which seems like what they were mostly doing the entire weekend is just drinking a lot.
That seems fair. Again, I watch a lot of below deck. They drink a lot on these boats.
He lies down and wakes up around 5 o'clock when they reach Avalon. So another thing that I can show you is this map of Catalina Island.
Good, because I don't know any of it.
So this is Avalon. This is Avalon Bay. Avalon there's two main parts of Catalina Island. Avalon, which is I would say it's the southeast kind of corner-ish of this long thing that looks like an upside down turtle on this map. I don't know. What do you think it looks like?
Looks like a drumstick.
I guess so. Okay.
Looks like a drumstick with the bone facing the top.
Oh, I could see that. So this is Avalon. They reached there around 5 p.m. The other big part of the island is Two Harbors, which is over here kind of on the northern part of the island.
It's the bottleneck point where the chicken stops, but it's all bone.
Yes, it looks like a dead chicken, but on its back at a weird angle. But yeah, so it's where the neck would be. And then Avalon is kind of where the feet would be. Again, I'll send you these pictures.
It does look like a dead chicken. The people of Catalina Island are screaming at us so loud.
So Friday, 5 to 10, they go to shore to drink. This is, they drink just for, 5 fucking hours. They're bar hopping. I think they go to like an arcade. Wagner buys some really expensive piece of jewelry for Natalie Wood that is in a barnacle, which I hate barnacles. And so I remembered that like it was in a barnacle. And it's like, that's fucking terrifying. Because have you ever thought about barnacles? They're gross. They're like fucking horrible. I hate barnacles. And they have that little thing.
I just love your strong position on barnacles.
Drinking, shopping, partying, Friday from 5 to 10. Walken says around that night she was hesitant to go back to the Splendor because, quote, it was dark, it was cold, and she was afraid she would get wet. Again, remember, she has a lifelong fear of drowning in dark water. Sometime after 10, there's some sort of hubbub, and says to Davern, Dennis Davern, who is the, family friend / captain / henchman for Wagner. RJ.
I want a henchman.
Me too. RJ and Natalie are fighting. He starts to walk away, saying, never get involved in an argument between a man and his wife. And so he goes to bed. Around this time, though, actually, Natalie and Davern, the henchman guy, leave the boat. She goes with him and they check into 2 rooms at a hotel. However, only one of the rooms is stayed in. Next morning, Wood wakes up Walken saying she's going to go take the seaplane back to the mainland. And she wants to know if he's coming or staying. He says, I'm not in this. And he ends up staying on the boat, but so does she. They move from Avalon to Two Harbors, which is where I just showed you. And some time before 2, Wood and Wagner go ashore to drink. This would be now in Two Harbors. A couple hours later, Wagner and Davern meet Wood and Walken at Doug's. They make a dinner reservation at 7 p.m. Everyone is wasted, drunk, AF. We'll come back to this moment when I go through the other timelines, but everyone is wasted. Christopher Walken says that the glass that was broken was his fault. He says, no, it wasn't anyone throwing glasses at each other. I threw my drink on the ground. And then Natalie said that it was like a Russian tradition to drink and then throw your glass on the ground and break it. And so they broke glasses, and it was totally chill and fine, and everything was fine. Not a big deal. The table had 2 bottles of champagne, 2 bottles of wine, 5 daiquiris, and whatever they had been drinking before. You know, they've been drinking all day. At 10 p.m., they begin to leave the restaurant. But again, Natalie does not want to go back because it's too dark, it's too cold, and the weather had been quite stormy all weekend long. There were witnesses that said that she was so drunk she couldn't zip up her jacket and she had trouble walking. So a witness said, quote, it was sprinkling out and he put his coat over her head. This would be R.J. Wagner. And they walked out and she smacked into this wood tiki pole at the front door, and quote,
Ooh.
which is something I've certainly done before. But gosh, keep in mind, again, she's on this 800 calorie diet on mood stabilizers and has been drinking nonstop for like 48 hours. So that's a thing. 2 separate calls are made to Harbor Patrol to keep an eye out for this group of, like, drunkards. And so they did. They both reported Natalie was stumbling and screamed, not like out of, like, not like because she fell or something, but she was angry. She was stumbling and angry when they got to the dinghy. They get back to the Splendor, like, somewhere between, let's call it 20 minutes later. And they all go into the main salon, which is the main room in this yacht. Now, here's where the stories really begin to diverge. So, according to Walken and Wagner got into an anonymous small beef that disturbed Natalie. He would later tell the first investigator, quote, this is what the first investigator says that Walken told him, quote, they had all been drinking and they had one of those conversations going where you kind of put your cards on the table. RJ was making statements and complaining that Natalie was away from home too much, that she was away from the kids, and that it was hurting their home life. Walken stated he also got involved in this discussion supporting Natalie's view that she was an actress, she was an important person. This was her life. He suddenly realized he was violating his own view about getting involved with an argument between a man and his wife. So he went outside for air, and when he got back, he says everything seemed fine. So that's his account of what happened in the first half of 10 o'clock hour. Back half, Natalie's back in her room. Let's call it 10:40. He knows that she went there to go to bed. And the next thing he knows is the captain is saying that the dinghy is gone. And at about the same time, they noticed that Natalie was gone. So Natalie, according to all records combined, Natalie goes missing somewhere between 10:45 and 11:30 p.m. Okay, so at 1:30 p.m., so 2 hours,
AM.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, AM. So let's call it 11:30 that she goes missing. At 1:30 a.m., the first call to the island is made. Wagner says, quote, this is the Splendor. We need help. Somebody's missing from the boat. He didn't want to get the Coast Guard involved because she was likely just drinking at the bar, is what he originally said. He was slurring his words, making it hard for people to understand him. But he was just making a point that, we're celebrities and we don't want to make a big deal. If she's just drinking at the bar at 1:30 in the morning after a lifetime of being terrified of water. So the early search party was a restaurant manager and a maintenance man looking on the island for Natalie.
The saddest thing. 2 people.
2 people who
They just had 2
shouldn't be. They happened to be listening to this radio. It was very random. 2 a.m. Wagner is dropped off at 2 harbors at the Harbor Patrol to search the waters for Natalie. So now, 2 a.m., he is looking for Natalie with Harbor Patrol. 15 minutes later, he goes back to the Splendor because he's frustrated she can't be found. 2:30, so we're still in the 2 o'clock hour, Harbor Master goes to the Splendor and finds Davern and Wagner drinking like buddies. They were so drunk they had trouble putting words together, but agreed, quote, they saw no reason she would have gone ashore again, end quote. Another thing that he would say, publicly is, he thinks that she went to the hotel to call her kids for some reason at midnight.
Weird.
Yeah. His story changes a lot. 3:30 a.m. is when the Coast Guard is finally called because just these are randos helping this guy because he's a celebrity.
Well, the harbor master I get, and the harbor patrol, that's part of their job, but to make sure everything's okay. But I think as soon as they've been informed that someone's missing, probably should call the Coast Guard.
He was very adamant.
But again,
like, he specifically said, don't call the Coast Guard, don't call Baywatch, which was something that I hadn't heard of since the 90s.
Yeah.
But he did not want Baywatch called. 5:30 a.m. is when they find the dinghy with oars locked, ignition off, gear set to neutral, and scratch marks along the side.
Oh no.
A couple hours later, 7:44 a.m. is when Natalie is found. So she is found wearing socks, a flannel nightgown, and a down coat. It's a red down coat that, because it like has filled up with air, is kind of holding her like afloat on the water. But she's otherwise just hanging there. Notable about her body is that she has bruises and cuts on the left side of her face and bruises all along her arms, the exterior part, like her anterior part of her arms and legs. So she's got bruises here, here, here. Sorry, listener. Her nose, her mouth, the left side of her face, her neck, her right arm, elbow, her right forearm, her left wrist, her left thigh, left elbow, what the fuck? Knee. Jesus, body parts. Her left knee, her right knee, and something on her ankle. So
I could see like her legs being more bruised because if you're in the water, if you bump up against things. But you said her coat was inflated, so that would definitely probably protect some of your body.
Later coroners would say that these bruises were fresh bruises that would have happened right before she died.
I hate it.
So Natalie is found at 7:44. Wagner decides now is when he wants to get on a helicopter. So he and Christopher Walken get on a helicopter and head back to LA, sending Davern to identify the body of his wife.
Fuck him.
They interview with the police around 10, and they are like, wow, we have no idea what is happening. So let's jump over to Wagner's kind of breakdown of what happened. Now, his story has changed so many times that like what I'm telling you probably isn't even all of the story. It's changed a lot. So what I have here are things that he said at least twice or that I saw at least twice across my sources. So Saturday 2 p.m., he wakes up and he finds out that Wood and Walken, this is when they had gone ashore to drink. He says, okay, fine. These fuckers are probably cheating on me, you know. So he goes with Davern a couple hours later and meets them there. Wagner begins a political argument with Walken. So keep in mind at this dinner, when they have 2 bottles of champagne, 2 bottles of wine, 5 daiquiris, and whatever they had been drinking before then, because Wood and Walken had been drinking, you know, prior to him arriving there. This is when he thinks it's a good idea to start a political argument with Walken.
Solid choices.
Solid choices. So otherwise, things are the same. You know, everybody's seeing this drunk-ass party. A lot of people are saying there is a lot of tension at the party. By a lot of people, I mean the servers there, the managers there, the host there, and other patrons of the restaurant.
Not gonna lie, staff definitely noticed that.
Yeah.
Because we ain't got better shit to do than watch you.
The first server for the table was actually so annoyed at their behavior that someone else took over for her.
Definitely have never done that.
Yeah. Just like, I cannot deal with these fuckers. So they get back to the Splendor, you know, they're all wasted. Everybody's, you know, calling the harbor patrol to like make sure that, you know, they get back to their boat okay. And so they get back to the Splendor. They all go into the main salon. Wagner continues his political argument with Walken. He says, quote, Natalie sat there, not saying much of anything and looking bored. She left us after about half an hour, and we sat there talking for almost another hour, end quote. He says the argument was nonviolent. When police later went into the main salon, it looked like a fucking brawl had happened. Like, notably, this wine bottle had been smashed up against a table. He says, no, they were just having a political discussion. It was nonviolent. The wine bottle must have just broken by itself because of the water, and it was stormy. However, in his 2009 autobiography, you know, with the clarity of 30 years after this drunken weekend, he says, oh, he did break the wine bottle.
I'm glad he's willing to admit that. you know what? I didn't do anything else, but I did break that wine bottle. That was my bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's significant because everybody was like, well, what was the atmosphere like when you got back? I mean, the atmosphere for the whole weekend was drunken anger, really. And so...
drunken, awkward, jealous anger.
Yeah, drunken, jealous anger. He says that around 10:45 or 11:30, this is around the time when Natalie goes missing, he says he went in to give her a kiss goodnight and noticed she was missing soon after he finds the dinghy is gone. I think it's fucking weird as shit that it's so specific. He went in to give her a kiss goodnight after this angry throwing full-on wine bottles across the, main room. He goes to give his wife a kiss goodnight. So, but according to his story, she was just bored and decided to go back to her room, So that's what...
which is not what Walken says. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that RJ has already shown to be really jealous, and it could have been building all weekend, and he could have confronted her back in the room or something like that, said something. We don't know.
So, yeah, we don't know. So we know, though, that she goes missing somewhere between 10:45 and 11:30 p.m. Around 11 p.m., people hear a male and female voice arguing. They think it is at the back of the Splendor, and this is the first time ear witnesses have been cited. At exactly 11:05 p.m., John Payne, Marilyn, and Anthony Wayne. Payne and Wayne, I just thought it was so this guy and his girlfriend, Marilyn Wayne, hear a woman crying, "Somebody please help me, I'm drowning." They also hear men's plural voices. "Oh, don't worry, we'll help you." And "Hold your hat, we're coming to get you." They called the harbor master, who was off duty at 10:30, and then called Avalon, who sent a search helicopter, but it never came. Meanwhile, they began using their searchlights, but the water was super choppy and they couldn't see anything.
I think it's interesting that the woman says, "Please help me, I'm drowning," because if you're actively drowning, you don't get the chance to talk. So she must have been struggling, because there's a couple different ways you drown. So there's active, which you're thrashing around and what you normally see, and people are like, "Oh, their mouth is up." It's like, no, if you're at that point of drowning, you are not talking. So she's probably struggling. She's getting to the point of active drowning. A passive drowning is when you hit your head and you just sink. So you're already out and you're just underwater. That's a scarier one for me, just because you have to then get someone out. You have to put them on a backboard to get them out of the water. I mean, active drowning is scary because if you are careful getting them and calming them, they can take you down. Lifeguards are trained to deal with people freaking the fuck out, and no one realizes it.
Were you trained as a lifeguard?
I was a lifeguard for 6 years. I have saved double digits number of people.
Wow.
I've backboarded double digits number of people. Never had to do CPR. I've done a ton of first aid. But yeah, so for them, she's definitely you could see if you're freaking out that much, you're definitely getting towards the part of actively drowning, and your mind goes immediately irrational. There's nothing you can do. And it's scary to watch. So I completely get these people being taking it 110% seriously, because if someone's freaking out that much, you're going to start swallowing water. You're going to get water in your lungs. And even if you do get them out on time, say they do have water in your lungs, you can dry drown. So if you, safety tip, if you get someone out who has swallowed water, still take them to the ER, because there could be water in their lungs and they can die later on. You don't know. So safety tip, I know we're in the winter now in the US, but definitely if you see that and you pull them out and they're still coughing, it's a good idea to go and still get them checked out. Because let's say you pull them out, you don't know how long they've been under or something, or how much water they swallowed. You don't want to say coulda, woulda, shoulda with drowning.
And another thing, because she's wearing this down jacket, this down coat, which would eventually be a flotation device, but for this tiny, tiny woman who had been on an 800-calorie diet and drunk as fuck so that she couldn't even zip it up earlier that night, it would become saturated with water. And it would be even harder for her to swim, which was something that she was not skilled at / didn't know how to swim. It was one or the other. She didn't know how to swim, or she was bad at it.
And swimming with clothes. So you said it's down. I don't know what kind of material it is. Anytime it's waterlogged, you have to be pretty strong. So even if she was strong, you're drunk. Dealing with drunk people in the pool is the worst. in water is the worst. Just because they think they're helping and your movements are more erratic and slow. And she's wearing flannel. That's going to get filled with water. Like, a lot of it is just going to get really waterlogged, and it's going to make all of her movements more difficult. You need to get, like, a ring to her, give her something. You want to do a ring. You don't want to put, like, a shepherd's crook or something, or put something out there, because she can pull you in. That's always a fear.
Oh, gosh.
Like,
they did say they turned on their searchlights. They wondered if they should get in their dinghy to look for it, but they had deflated it earlier in the day, so they didn't have an accessible or quickly accessible dinghy themselves, so they couldn't.
But they also have to think of their safety. They don't want, like they said, it was choppy, and if it's going to take so long, like, she might blow away. You might then get lost. It's like, sometimes they always tell you have to make sure you're safe first in order to rescue people. It's like, hey, the building's on fire. I need to make sure I can get people out, but I also have to make sure I can get out.
Right, for sure. And, as you note, like, timing, so it's 20 minutes later that they estimate the woman's cries stop. So they're listening, and they're quoted as saying it was a good 15 minutes. They estimate 20, that they hear this woman, like, crying and men's voices mocking her.
That's just, how bad do they feel, though? Because later on they have to know they listened to her die.
Oh, yeah.
They have to know.
And they had gone to the police, too.
Yeah, and they tried to do everything right. And it's just, drowning is a horrible death. It's a horrible thing to witness. It's scary. And I couldn't imagine listening to it, because once she stops talking, she's just inhaling water at that point.
Yeah. They had given statements after they found out that it was probably Natalie Wood who they had heard. They went directly to the police and they told them what was said, but their, testimony was buried and never used.
Powerful people.
So he ended up, he went and was interviewed by the police around 10 a.m. He said, quote, "It was only after I was told that she was dressed in a sleeping gown, heavy socks, and a parka that it dawned on me what had really occurred. Natalie obviously had trouble with that dinghy slamming up against the boat." So he is saying that, and now I have the layout of the boat that they were on. So this is the dinghy, and note that, the dinghy is actually tied in two places. So he's saying that she was here, annoyed by a rubber dinghy bumping up against the boat here.
So listeners,
sorry.
The dinghy's at the back of the boat. The bed is kind of like halfway through, but there's like a rear dock there as well. So there is space, but if they've already been sleeping on this boat, you gotta kind of think.
And it's tied in both places. And she is a fucking movie star who has hired a captain for her boat trip, who's still awake. So why would she be going to fix this dinghy situation is one of the main questions here. But he says that this is obviously what happened. He, in fact, says, "It happened many, many times before, and I had always gone out and pulled the ropes to keep the dinghy flush against the yacht. She probably skidded on one of the steps after untying the ropes." He says, quote, "The steps are slick as ice because of the algae and seaweed that's always clinging to them. After slipping on the steps, she hit her head against the boat. I only hope she was unconscious when she hit the water." So significant here, as many people would say later, is a couple things. Number one, she wouldn't go get the mail without like having a full face of makeup on. So he's saying she was wearing a nightgown and socks to go out onto her boat to do this thing. People are saying that like she was super, super intense about boat safety. In part because she's so terrified of drowning. So I don't think would have done this. I don't think she would have done this. Finally, the last kind of, I think, damning evidence here is that the algae on the step hadn't been messed with. It was fine. There was no evidence of slipping. But to him,
interesting,
he said, it dawned on me what really occurred. She obviously, did this shit that was super fucking specific in this very specific order. Like, what the fuck?
And I feel like Paul Holes, Kenda, all our TV cops that we love are calling bullshit right now. It's like, I'm sure that's what happened.
So we do have one last person on this boat who is still alive, and that would be Dennis Davern, the captain, who would have normally been the guy to do all these boat type things, but I guess in Wagner's view, he wasn't.
He's paid to do
He's
them.
paid to do it. So around Friday night, remember when Walken said all of them stayed on the boat? No one went anywhere. They all slept on the boat, is when Davern and Wood stayed in the hotel. Remember, they had gotten 2 rooms and they only ended up using 1. Davern says that they went back to her room, or rather his room, and they were drinking wine. There was unbearable tension even before them that led to a fight. And again, remember when Walken said never get involved in an argument. But Walken would contradict himself later and say that all 4 of them stayed on the boat. In fact, Davern would later say that they all stayed on the boat, even though later he would be like, oh, right, we spent a night together. And that's actually one of the reasons why Davern is like, while his account actually lines up and makes a lot of sense, because it went back and forth so many times, and because for me, it's pretty clear that he was just in it for the money, people don't trust him. So this is what I think, what I have here is basically what seems legit. So,
okay. I wonder if he also, because you said he was really close to RJ, I wonder if kind of RJ was like, hey, this is our narrative.
That is my theory, is that RJ did something, or Dennis and RJ did something. And what I don't understand is where Christopher Walken was during all of this time and why his story would be changing all over the place. He refuses to talk about it anymore.
Fair enough.
Fair. Yes. Especially if you had nothing to do with this horrible thing. But also if you had nothing to do with this horrible thing, why not?
But I think it's also he was constantly asked about it for so long, and if they were that close, do you want to think about how one of your best friends died this horrible thing, and maybe you're sworn to secrecy, maybe you can't talk about it,
Fair. So he says when they stayed the night at the hotel together, Natalie Wood told him all about Wagner's jealousy, basically saying that she wanted a divorce. She couldn't stand it anymore. So, they come back, and this is when, the next day, Robert Wagner's taking a nap, wakes up to the note, and already, Natalie Wood and Christopher Walken were at the bar and everything. They have that drunken dinner, etc. They go back to the boat. So now here we are, Saturday night. What he says happened when they first got back is, yes, they all went into the main salon. That is something that they all say. However, he says, we got back to the boat and Natalie's in a giggling state by now, talking with Christopher and being pretty chummy. And it was beginning to upset RJ to the point where he had to explode. He later revised his account saying, RJ and Natalie got into a discussion about her being gone and how RJ missed her. This is in line with what Walken said. During this discussion between them, Chris Walken entered into it and supported Natalie's view. RJ then smashes a wine bottle on the table and says, what do you want to do? Fuck my wife? At that point, Chris knew it was time to leave the room because if he didn't, it could have turned into a big fight.
I could believe that, because RJ even admits later he broke the wine bottle. And I think it could have started off, it could have been both. They were having a chummy conversation, joking around, Walken, RJ and Natalie then start fighting about something stupid because he's just trying to get her attention.
Just kind of stepping backwards diagonally. I'm wondering why Christopher Walken is there in the first place. Why would RJ let this happen when he was already that jealous of this guy who just won an Oscar for the Deer Hunter PS? He's very insecure about his career. He's very insecure about his possession over his wife. At the restaurant, this is another interesting observation, and this is in the book, Suzanne Feinsted's book. But she's saying at the restaurant, people were seeing Natalie did look like she was flirting a lot with Christopher Walken, but RJ seemed to be flirting with Christopher Walken.
Interesting.
So one of the things that I thought maybe, just, because who the fuck knows really, but maybe he was flirting with him almost to try to get back at her because he knew she hated him being bisexual and he was jealous. So it was kind of this
tit for tat.
That's kind of what I wondered.
And Christopher Walken is just stuck there in this awkward dinner party. He's just I thought I was invited for a nice weekend with your husband and you. Mm-hmm. We all get to know each other. Maybe it was they were trying to show him hey, we're just friends. This is an easy thing. We're just friends. Nothing's happening.
Maybe.
And RJ just can't get over it. Because I could see that being a thing. Let's all get to know each other. That way this isn't a problem.
I could see that. And like, you know, him being like too proud to say no, you know, that he couldn't be okay with it. But then he's faced with the reality of what that looks like, that kind of deep emotional connection that he clearly feels he does not share with her for some reason or something. Anyway, so back at the stateroom, Davern's saying that they got in a fight. He throws the wine bottle. Natalie is so devastated at the way RJ acted that she just got up and went straight into her stateroom saying, "RJ, I'm not standing for this a minute longer." So this is quite dramatic and different from what both Christopher Walken and Robert Wagner says. Davern says that Wagner follows directly after, yelling, throwing things, and he hears what sounds like a physical fight. This concerns Davern so much that he knocks on the door and Wagner tells him to go away.
But that kind of, like, didn't the ear witnesses say they heard
fighting?
They heard
fighting. A man and a woman fighting.
So that would kind of make sense. And you said the salon looked like there had been a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have just been RJ, like, showing his rage.
Yeah, I think it was like they were fighting. I mean, everybody's fucking wasted is another thing. Everyone is wasted as fuck. So, you know, they likely, you know, I can't find my map of the yacht anymore. But they, you know, they went from their stateroom. They started in the stateroom. Davern at this point, after he's told to go away, he goes up to the bridge and can hear more fighting. Now it sounds like they're on the back of the boat, which is where the ear witnesses think that is most likely. I mean, it wasn't the front of the boat, so it was probably the back of the boat where the dinghy was. They think that they heard clearly a woman and a man's voice. So, you know, Natalie goes missing. Around 11:30, he doesn't engage, he doesn't do anything, he just sits there, I guess, according to him. 11:30, Wagner meets Davern up on the bridge. He seems tousled and out of breath, as if he had just doing some kind of strenuous labor. He says Natalie is missing. Davern and Wagner look, but can't find her on the yacht. Davern suggests using the spotlight and using the floodlights, which would illuminate the water around them, but Wagner says no.
Weird.
Likely, she's gone back to the island to call the kids, and they don't want to make this a big deal, so they drink scotch for over an hour.
I wonder if there was something else said to make him really not do anything, because I feel like he's liable, like he's responsible for all of them.
I think all three of them are. How can people now, there's been so many people online that like explain sound over water and like how it is possible for Christopher Walken to be in his room on the boat and the sound from the boat like muffling out someone yelling outside to help her. But, you know, a lot of people are saying, why would these other boats, like the closest one being 70 feet away, hear her in their room, but Christopher Walken didn't?
But think about it, if you're drunk off your ass.
Yeah, that's the other fucking
factor.
factor.
And you fall asleep. I'm sorry, my drunk sleep, I am dead. And I live like near a busy road. And I don't hear, like, and I have, like, my neighbors will be, like, somewhat loud sometimes because there's teenage boys that live next to me. Like, I can't hear shit. I just pass out. I have a good little sleepy sleep. I regret it in the morning, but still.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is the other fucking factor, right? So, like, I don't really know. But
I don't know, get blackout drunk and fall asleep in the room and have someone scream.
I feel like I would
there's
hear
ways
that.
to recreate this.
Oh. Yeah. So another thing is, I mean, Walken's story gosh, words today. Walken's story changed. So it changed in specificity and it changed over like what they were fighting about. He didn't even say anything about this political disagreement.
I wonder if it's just how memory changes over time too.
Also, how much of this night do they actually remember is another thing. Like, maybe
true.
He fucking murdered the shit out of her. Well, okay.
Maybe he maybe RJ beat the shit out of her. Walken was blackout drunk, had gone to bed or gone to a different part of the boat, passed out, didn't hear shit. Like, two people are making fun of her as she's drowning then, you know?
The ear witnesses say there were at least two men's voices mocking her. So here's why Suzanne Feinstead released an updated version of her biography of Natalie Wood. It's because two reasons. Number one, Davern has come forward with more information, saying that he saw Robert Wagner push her off the boat, and that the last things that Robert Wagner said to her was, get off my fucking boat.
I could see that if he was so jealous and he was just like done. He's like, you're flirting with this guy. Like, you're ignoring me. I should be the only one. Kind of like, if I can't have you, nobody can. That could be a very plausible answer.
Yeah. And then another, response would be the only reason we know that is because he sold that information like decades later. So like, to what extent is this real? Right? So the other thing, though, the other part of this is that they were re-looking at those marks on her body. So I'll show you the body again.
Yeah, Linzi's showing the autopsy report version of a body. She's not showing me actual pictures of... I should say, she's not showing actual pictures of the body. I'm sure they have them.
Yeah. They can be found, and I didn't want to.
But she's not showing me, like, pictures of a dead body. I should have
it's just like the autopsy, or, how do you say, like, coroner report type thing?
It's the coroner report of where the injuries are. We've all seen it on a bunch of crime shows, you know.
So these scrapes, what she noticed later is that they were in the wrong direction of someone who was trying to get on a dinghy.
Okay.
Instead, they're in the direction of they're scrapes as if one had been pushed or one, they're not in the, like if you're trying to climb onto something, the scrapes would look a certain way and be in a certain direction. But these are outside of her leg. This is the outside of her thigh.
They would be going up. Like they'd be like, if you're trying to climb up, it's going to be... Think of how you get in and out of a pool. They're going to be on your calves. They're going to maybe be on your knees. They're on the side of her, right thigh?
Left thigh, yeah.
Left thigh. Anytime I've gotten out of a pool and I've, like, scraped up stuff, like, there are some on our calves, but the majority seem to be, like, she got pushed over on her left side. So, I mean, I could see that.
After her findings, actually, the case was never closed. It was always an open case. They just said that it was an accident and they wrote it off. They did not ask, Wayne and Payne for their information. Even though they came forward and offered it, they didn't really investigate the autopsy or anything in that regard. So she was buried. There was a funeral.
Gotta be so hard because you said she's a stepmother and has her own kid. Can you imagine just not knowing what actually happened?
The kids. Her sister Lara has like spearheaded, basically it seems like she dedicated the rest of her life to trying to figure this out, She did not originally blame RJ, even though, get this too, they didn't find out. They only found out because a family friend saw Natalie Wood's death on TV. So the family friend called them and woke them up on Sunday morning. He didn't fucking call her parents, or her mom, who was the only one alive. Her father had passed away. He didn't call them.
I'm sorry. I couldn't imagine having a partner and not informing them of my spouse's, like, parish.
Yeah, I mean...
Like, dying.
He was also hungover and drunk and in a weird place. However, he did call his daughters, and he arranged for their children together to see a child psychologist.
Okay, I mean, in some regards, better?
So she was buried. Her pallbearers were Elizabeth. Excuse me. No, they weren't. I might have copied and pasted the wrong information. Here we go. She, at her funeral, her pallbearers were Rock Hudson, Sir Laurence Olivier, who flew in from England for this, Elia Kazan, Gregory Peck, David Niven, Fred Astaire, and Frank Sinatra.
Good to know he molested her young and helped bury her. Cool.
It is Suzanne Feinstad's opinion that the reason why this went away so quickly was filed as an accident and was not really investigated at all to any degree was because of Frank Sinatra and Robert Wagner's connections and money. The person that interviewed Robert Wagner, his first interview was with that guy, Dwayne Razier. The interview was 6 minutes long, and Dwayne Razier, when he later spoke of it, mostly spoke about how cool it was that he got to interview a celebrity.
I'm screaming into the void right now because no one wants to listen to it, but I'm screaming inside. Can you believe?
And then, like, he also said, like, he described the way that he had gotten the coffee and he offered it to him and, RJ took it from him and nodded or whatever the fuck. And it's like, really? This is what? And so, I mean, it was 81, that he was a celebrity, had been for decades. He was a big star. These people are big names. Christopher Walken had just won the Oscar, like I said. These are big people. And so he was like, oh, well, probably it's fine. So...
as we always know, it's not fine.
What's interesting is since so much time has passed and they have basically lost evidence and shit, the murder book that has all kinds of information, including Wayne and Payne's information and all that Suzanne Feinstead had taken pictures of and documented when she got to look at it, is now missing.
Of course.
The case was never closed, but they like actively reopened it or something. They announced that they just, hey, we're still doing this, everyone. I don't know.
Oh, they were renewing interest in it because it's a cold case.
They can't actually charge anyone with the murder anymore. However, they can like take different legal, they can't say murder, but they could do other things. And so they have said that Robert Wagner is a person of interest in Natalie Wood's death, which I think he fucking is. But I still maintain my position that like I think all three of them are sketchy motherfuckers who, you know, if it is true, also like if Davern's account of the entire weekend is being so angry and jealousy filled and like violent and all that shit, like why is Walken there? He shouldn't be there. Like,
it is weird that Walken's there if it's all this angst about it.
Mm-hmm. And he's married himself. So
I really feel like it was a weird invite to be like, I'm cool. Like, just be like, let's like Natalie trying to do an olive branch kind of thing. Like, I promise you there's nothing going on. Da 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 da. Yeah. And Wagner just, like you said, he had so many deep-seated jealousies over her and controlling her. And Walken seemed to get his wife better than he did. So he's pissed about it.
Mm-hmm. So my theory is, like, Walken woke up at some point and found out, and Wagner and Davern, probably Wagner threw her overboard, as Davern said, but he saw this fucking happen and didn't do anything about it for decades. Was after this happened, he moved into Robert Wagner's Beverly Hills home.
That seems like either RJ wanted to keep an eye on him, or there was some sort of agreement come to that night before everything got
It does not
came out.
In any situation, this looks sketchy as fuck, I think. Yeah. He, and then slowly this information comes out from him. One incident was when he went on Geraldo, and he and this woman that was going to help him write a book, and they did release a book later, Marty Ruley, he makes a comment to her. They're on hot mics, and he makes a comment like, oh, like, what do I say about like him pushing her? And she's like, no, don't say that. We got to put that in the book. We'll make a bunch of money, like, because when we put it in the book. And so then after, everybody's like, fucking, there's pushing involved? Like, what the fuck, you know? And so then it wasn't...
It's a jinx situation where they didn't realize the mics were still live.
And yeah, I mean, that's the fucking story. That's all we know.
I wonder if the captain feels really guilty now. And it's like, it's because initially you have to think he's so close to Wagner, but they probably have like separated ways and all of that over the years. And he probably just wants to, like, certain people, I'm pretty sure we're going to probably get a deathbed confession or something.
I hope.
About what actually
I
happened.
just feel like Walken, because his stories were inconsistent and he was there drinking with them, he was there like minutes before this likely happened, you know? I mean, yes, it's very based on like the degree to which they sound like they were fucking wasted. Yeah, he could have just passed out like immediately. Like, I have also done that, you know? But
I could see what you said, like he woke up and probably stumbled across it and they were like, this is our story, keep to it. And that's why he can't remember the details anymore, because it isn't the actual story, it's what he was told to tell.
That's kind of what I think. And so he's implicated in this, like, because he didn't say anything to begin with, and then so now he's fucked himself, kind of, because he didn't.
He's a conspirator after the fact.
That's my personal theory based on like what I've read in Suzanne Feinstead's Natalie Wood book, which is really actually quite good. The only thing that I wish she had done is I wish she had cited things. Like, where did she get all of this information? She does, like, say, oh, Natalie's friend, you know, in an interview. She apparently interviewed over 400 people for the book. And she spent something like 4 years on this book, which Robert Wagner never said that he read, but was full of lies.
I love that. Yeah, aren't you glad I told you to read that book?
I am, actually. I'm really glad that you told me about it, because it was really... it's a project kind of to work through, but it's an enjoyable one because you learn, or I learned so much about this poor woman's life, her talent, how talented, how dedicated to work she was, how cool she seemed. She seemed to be a good friend, a really excellent mother to her children, actually. And so it's just so sad that someone with inversely like a super tragic. Oh, another thing. Sorry, I had notes. I was like, I know I'm gonna forget this. Okay. Remember how she took a sleeping pill every night to go to sleep? She hadn't taken the sleeping pill yet. You know how she always wore that left thing? She didn't have that on her wrist. Like, where the fuck was that? But there was a gold chain around her waist and she had rings on. So it was like clear that like something happened to the thing on her wrist. I mean, there's just sketchy things. The coroner said that her blood alcohol level was 0.14.
Damn.
Which, yeah, like 0.08 is like, you don't want to drive. 0.14 is probably...
You legally are not allowed to drive.
Probably lay down. But this is also like, you know, after she had died. So, yeah, get off my fucking boat, says Davern, said Wagner.
Please tweet at us and let us know, what do you think happened to Natalie Wood?
Yeah, what do you think? Also, like, you know, what other details? Because it's true that, like, there are so many different variations on all three of these guys' stories. Like, maybe I missed something and there's something, you know, to note.
But this is the end of Linzi's journey this time on the regular feed. If you want to hear more of Linzi, all the notes, because she wrote beautiful notes for the Black Death. She showed them to me already. She's going to send them to me because that's what we do. We're weirdos. We know it. But all that stuff's on Patreon. So if you want more Linzi, good times, you know, interesting social media or interesting media for history and true crime, check out the Patreon feed. It's going to go through a little rework for the new year, but it'll definitely be crazy awesome. So we will see you next time with a new guest. Linzi and I are going to go record a Patreon episode now. I'm going to get another tea because I need caffeine.
Boom, boom.
Bye.
God.
Yeah, I love etymology.
Spooky. Murder.
Double murder.
Zombies. Horror is always political.
I don't like that at all.
Hi, I'm Alex, and
I'm Sunshine, her creep-enabling best friend.
Together we tackle all things horror, politics, science, and sociology. Zombies.
Pomegranates and Pitchforks is a horror and true crime podcast that brings true stories and not-so-true stories together in beautiful and disturbing harmony.
Hey, Sasha.
Hey, Courtney.
Where can you get hot takes about ghosts, cryptids, farts, and cats?
I don't know, where?
On our podcast, Spoop Hour.
Oh, that's right.
Each week we talk about the things that spook us out and we laugh through our fear.
You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Spoop Hour, and you can listen to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, or really anywhere else that you get your podcasts. Feel free to also drop us a line at spoophour@gmail.com.
We want to hear about your ghosts.
Thanks.
Domesticity. We're available on all podcatchers. Remember to rate, review, subscribe to help spread the word, or just force other people to listen to it. Our Facebook and Twitter are at Domestic Podcast, and our Instagram is at the Cult of Domesticity. We also have podcast merch at Threadless. As well, if you want to support us financially or show some appreciation, we have a PayPal tip jar and a Patreon, which has some pretty great perks. Any topic suggestions, feel free to email us at domesticpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to stay domestic and cult free.